Hello, today is Friday, April 18th, and welcome to episode 441 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by my motley crew of Martha Miller, NSI's Deputy Executive Director, and Les Munson, our tallest advisory board member. Welcome, folks. Okay. Unfortunately, we're back to tariffs. I tried to get us away from it, but it's a story that keeps up going in the headlines. This week, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was in Washington to meet with President Donald Trump. Discussing what else, a looming trade showdown between the U.S. and the EU. As everyone knows, Trump has been threatening steep tariffs across a number of European industries, automobiles, agriculture, you name it, it's probably on the list. During Meloni's visit, and in reports leading up to it, there have been talks that President Trump is reportedly pressuring the EU really to choose between, the U.S. or China when it comes to economic ties. At the same time, the EU is currently in talks with Beijing over reducing tariffs on Chinese EVs, a topic we've talked about here on the show. After the discussions with Prime Minister Meloni, President Trump said he's 100% confident of getting a trade deal, but he's not in a rush, which I'm sure makes Europeans and the world's financial markets not at all concerned. Just to remind folks, Meloni is Italy's first female prime minister, a hard right leader who talks tough on immigration and on the EU bureaucracy. And she was the only EU leader invited to President Trump's inauguration. And President Trump praised her leadership on her visit on Thursday. Also, because we can't just stick to news here in the U.S. and on planet Earth, folks haven't been following. There's been a universal discovery. Scientists using data from Hubble and Webb telescopes found signs of molecules on an exoplanet associated with biological activity found here on Earth, which is a possible sign of life. So let's not get too, who cares about their 401k, right? When we can talk about life on other planets. Okay. So to kick us off, Martha, what's going on? What's going on between the EU and US? Like, is Prime Minister Meloni, is she the representative for the EU? Is she sent here because she's on good graces with the president and she's trying to get the best deal that the EU can hope for?
Yeah, I am fascinated actually by Meloni because here she is a representative of the Italian far right, and yet she is it's a populist populist movement just as much as the MAGA movement is a populist movement on the right here in the United States. So here she is actually in a bilateral meeting, but essentially here on behalf of a multilateral organization. So I find that to be a very interesting juxtaposition because on the one hand, she actually was criticized a little bit by some French counterparts, but at the same time, the EU fully endorsed her visit, and there's a lot of hopes being pinned on her ability to persuade Donald Trump to be reasonable with regard to the EU and trade. I actually think she is in a great position to do so. She has an amazing rapport with President Trump. She was genuinely received as with the red carpet treatment. And not everyone who's been to the Oval Office has been treated that way, as we all know. And so I think I actually am hopeful. I think the EU should be hopeful that she is capable of this, but at the same time, the member states are going to have to be reasonable themselves and perhaps, take the Musk, take advantage of the fact that Musk has actually been talking about zero tariffs across the board between the EU and the United States. And use all of that to their advantage. Frankly, I personally think that would also be to the advantage of American consumers and taxpayers. But yes, I think it'll be fascinating to see how this unfolds. And, the charm offensive from Meloni, which I assume is underway while Vance is there presently. And of course, Trump accepted an invitation to Italy, which should also be, a fascinating thing. Again, a bilateral visit, but with EU issues at hand.
Thank you for that EU policy wonk perspective. Les, turning to you, never the policy wonk perspective, I might say. Do we buy the maybe one strategy is President Trump is trying to create a wedge between the EU and China? And if so, do we think that's going to work? What are the national security implications of what happens if the EU doesn't fully align with DC when it comes to China? But before this very important potential trade deal, what's going on outside of planet Earth? What's going on in this universe? Was this news about life possibly on another planet? Was that a big deal?
Decaying photoplankton on the planet K2-18b, 120 light years from Earth. That could be big. That could be really big. It might explain the mysterious drones over New Jersey a year ago. It could explain the little nodules on the ocean floor that the Harvard guy found. Mm-hmm. By the way, I wonder how the defunding of Harvard is going to affect the search for alien life.
That is its own topic on Fault Lines. That's not good.
Because it's the Harvard scientist who figured out that the asteroid turned left as it was going through the solar system, which started all this speculation. And I gotta say, like, is Trump defunding Harvard to cover up the search for aliens?
Because they know more.
Yeah, and maybe it is coming from this photoplankton decaying planet that's not too far away. Really, it would just take you a few thousand years to get there. So I do think there's
closer to Earth.
You're kind of closer to Earth question, Jones, about Italy and Meloni and whatnot, and what is the grand plan here? Is it to separate Europe from China? I think before you ask that, the question should be: is there a grand plan? Is there a strategy, or is it just throwing a bunch of stuff on the wall? I actually think there is a strategy here. I think it is a Trump maximum pressure on every single target strategy for the next 2 months while he gets his budget reconciliation bill through the Hill, through Congress, and on its way to him, which includes all the tax cuts and stuff. It's a way to keep the fiscal conservatives on side because they do not like this process. It's spending way too much money. The budget deficits are going to be huge. They're not even sure they like extra defense spending. That situation is so crazy that the Republican Party under Trump is now talking about raising taxes on the very rich, which is something that George H.W. Bush did, which everyone thinks is the most opposite Republican to President Trump would be George H.W. Bush. And yet it looks like we're on a path for both of them to raise taxes. How did that happen? Why are we here? So what is the grand strategy? I think the grand strategy is to get from one day to the other without any calamities. And so far, it's kind of working for Trump. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things happening. I don't know if it's going to have any kind of salutary impact on these negotiations. Martha did a great FOPO nerd analysis of multilateral versus bilateral and all that kind of stuff. And Meloni carrying the water for all the Eurocentric EU people. That's kind of funny because she's a right-wing populist herself. It's not really a fun Friday. It's a Good Friday episode. So I guess I don't know what's going to happen. I'm probably more interested in the decaying photoplankton than the trade talks with the Italian prime minister.
I mean, getting from one day to another is, I think, what a lot of us are just trying to do, right? Like every day it's like, oh, we made it. One more.
Yep.
Okay, so here's the question, because Martha, you didn't get to touch upon life on another planet. I want a quick round question. Do we think if there are being, life outside this planet, that one will come to Earth, and two, some humans will be alive on Earth when they visit? Martha, you first.
All I can say is there are a lot of people who've been looking for ways to leave the United States in recent months. Maybe they could hitch a ride on, like one of the one of the SpaceX vehicles, and go explore.
Les? That wasn't a real answer. Whether there's life out there and it's coming for us. Les?
Didn't some pop star just go on the last trip?
Katy Perry.
That was Blue Origin. Yeah, that was Blue Origin. Maybe the Kardashians could go for us. We could send them.
Are humans going to be around when our friends from outside Earth visit?
Jones, how do you know they weren't already here?
That was going to be my second part. Or have they
Yeah.
already been here?
No, I think we're going to hang around. We're kind of hard to get rid of. We kind of adapt to whatever the situation is. I don't see humans are kind of the,
Cockroaches?
maybe slightly higher than the cockroach maybe on the evolutionary scale. We're tough to kill off. We'll put up with a lot of nonsense, as I think the current news would tell you. So I'm fairly optimistic about us being around for a while.
So do we need to screen Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
No, right? Well, John Lipsy, if you're listening, we really wanted your input on this one. So just text us what you think. Thanks so much, folks. With Les's closing that we're a hardy bunch and we are meant to survive, that's a wrap to another week. We survived another one, guys. We're almost to late April here. Thanks so much to Kelly Crawley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Monday for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out how Les's new office is slowly getting decorated. And if you like what you heard or saw, or if you have a problem with Les's new decorations, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.